So I think it is 1 minute past 6. So let me kick off. Good evening, everyone. Good morning to you, Doc. Good afternoon, Roberto in Italy. It's such a pleasure to have all of you from different parts of the world coming together on this finale, the last day of the Stars Forum annual conference. Until 2019, Stars Forum, which had used to have its annual conference, and it always was in a place where we would all meet. 70, 80 people would come from different parts of India, and we would have.
Chaitanya ji, you please start the camera. Your camera is off, I guess.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you see me now?
Yeah. Please
Okay,
go
okay,
ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So until 2019, we used to have this annual conference in person. 70, 80 people from different parts of India would come together, and we would have a great time talking about what's happening on the ground and so on. Last 2 years has been completely different. The world is changed. We were also forced to go online. Last year 2020 was our first annual conference where we did entirely on Zoom, and this year again we've had to do that. uh, One of the big advantages of doing something like this on Zoom is a lot of participation from across this country, and not just that, from even outside India as well. And I'm particularly glad that some very eminent people from around the globe have offered to share their views, tell us their stories, what they have seen, and so on. And I think this wouldn't have happened if it were this good old way of everybody coming together for 2 or 3 days in a physical context. So I welcome you all back to the Stars Forum last finale, the last day of this 12th annual conference. Most of you would have heard different moderators introduce stars, so I'll not spend time on it today. And so let's straight away jump into why are we here? What did we ask Doc and Roberto to speak about? Last 1.5 years, everybody's had to change. We've seen individuals impacted in different ways across the globe. We've seen organizations affected differently in different ways, and communities have been affected as well. And what we are seeing is everybody is trying to adjust. We don't even know what this, in the early days of the COVID pandemic, there was this word which was used very often, or rather, not the word, but a phrase, the new normal. Uh, we don't know anymore. Is it the new normal? Is it here? Is it not yet here? Nobody is talking about it anymore, which probably means that we have somehow or the other found our way to adjust to what's going on. But interestingly, it's also a moment to take a look at what has happened, how things have changed, what have we seen differently now, and what does it tell us when we start going forward. So, which is why we call this the annual conference a COVID retrospective. A retrospective is when we look back, see what has gone well, what has not gone well, learn some lessons, and say, okay, now if we were to implement those lessons in going forward, what should we do? How can we do it differently, and so on. So this is the COVID retrospective conference. We have invited Robert Doc Hall and Roberto Catalano to speak about topics which are slightly different. One is, of course, it's for most of us in India, it's a different context. Doc has spent a lifetime in the US. He's been teaching in the Indiana University. He's been one of the pioneers of bringing lean thinking into the United States, and he has seen many aspects of what has gone wrong with the way the world runs today. And he's started this organization, and actually it's more of a group and an institute called the Compression Institute. So Doc is going to be talking about that. How can we change what we are doing? What's the bottom-up revitalization that is needed to bring the world back into what it should be? Um, Roberto Catalano is going to talk about a very different thing, about a word that has probably become very, very important in this pandemic. It is the fraternity. We in India have seen, a year ago when migrants were forced to walk hundreds of kilometers back home, how civil society stepped up. how each one was able to support somebody else. And everybody did that in their hometowns, in their homes, in their villages, in their cities, in their localities, and so on. We heard some wonderful stories 2 days ago from Shirish Patwardhan when he talked about what happened with youth who stood up and were taking care of cremations when people were not even allowed to touch their loved ones, and so on. So we are looking at different things, but the thing that stood out over there was the aspect of fraternity, and Roberto is going to talk about that. But without spending more time, I will now ask Doc to take over. Doc, over to you, sir.
Well, good evening to everyone in India, and I'm going to hop right to it. Thank you for inviting me to this. Um, I've been hearing for maybe the last 6 months or more about the STARS Forum, and I'm impressed with what you do. And so I'd like to prompt you to think about what you're doing even more intensely. And I will try not to talk too much because I'd rather hear what you do and what you are doing. And so let's hop right to it. My own background is manufacturing, working in it, teaching in it. And as Chai mentioned, I stormed the United States in the 1980s, persuading industry people to adopt lean manufacturing. But along the way, it began to occur to me that we had a lot of trouble. That what I was really doing was allowing companies to make an even bigger mess in the world than they could before. And so here's a long list of existential threats. Nature is biting back pretty hard. And so this is a long list. Won't dwell on it. Maybe just pick one or two. That very first one, you can see my pointer right about there, decreasing concentration of ores. No, we're not running out of ore. We're not running out of iron ore. We're not running out of aluminum. A lot of it is still there somewhere, but what's really happening is that the concentration is decreasing, so it takes more and more energy to get the stuff. And so you can't keep doing that. You have to tear up more and more earth to get what we need or think we need. And that grabs industry leaders' attention quicker than almost any of the rest of these. But just go down the list: high-tech conflict, nuclear, the what is it? The bulletin of the atomic scientists since 1947 have had a clock on the likelihood of nuclear confrontation. Nuclear bombs actually going off. They move the hands close to midnight. Those hands are now closer to midnight than they have been since the darkest days of the Cold War. We have assumed we're immune to this because so far everybody in a power position with control of nuclear weapons has been, quote, sane. Don't bet on it in the future. Here's another one down here: biodiversity loss. That's one that's sort of unsung. You hear more and more about it. But E.O. Wilson, for one, has a proposal that we should leave half of all the earth to nature, to natural evolution to proceed as it wishes. If we don't, we're going to be kicking away species until we kick away a few things that are essential to our own existence. And by the way, that could happen if we found alternate sources of energy and continue to use them to do what we do today. And so you go on down through this endocrine disruptors. A lot of people aren't into that. What's an endocrine disruptor? Well, it affects the glandular system of both humans and animals. And it's known that any number of chemicals disrupt those systems. One aspect of this that gets attention is decreasing sperm counts among human males almost everywhere in the developed world. What's that from? Well, while nobody knows specifically, just too many chemicals loose, which in very small concentrations can accumulate and have a very bad effect. You can go down this list. One that people talk about a great deal is human overpopulation. If you talk about difficulty dealing with this, what country in the world has most successfully dealt with a burgeoning population? China, with their one-child policy. And anytime you begin to restrict births, you have a social conundrum, to say the least, that people don't want to think about. Don't like the idea of you can only have one child or two. And down at the very bottom is climate change. That gets most of the attention. A number of these other things are put under that heading. What's climate change do? Well, primarily it makes all these other things worse. And then look at the list that I have down in the bottom part of this. Underestimated, at least in my opinion. Malnutrition. It's changed now. I don't know about India. I doubt if it's quite the same, but in the US, I'm old enough, I remember a little bit about World War II, and there were programs in the United States to put recruits into special programs and feed them extra to build them up because they hadn't had enough to eat. Today, about a third of all prospective recruits to the armed forces cannot qualify because they are too obese. A different kind of sickness. And then we've just been talking about the COVID pandemic. Could another pandemic come along? Yes. And the people that deal with that say not only could it, it is quite likely that some other virus or bacterium will get loose and cause the same kind of thing. I don't know about India, but I suspect that the people you deal with in rural villages suffer less from depression than some others. This is just beginning to get attention in the United States. Drug use, people going suicidal. Everything is supposed to be great. Why do they have that reaction to it? Our psychology, we can't see systemically. Because no brain is big enough to hold all the stuff on this screen. You just can't think about it all at once. And so what do we do about that particular problem? More later. It's overwhelming. Can't think about this much at once. We're not intellectually equipped to do it. And worse, advanced economies are addicted to economic expansion. Even compound interest is a growth formula. Naturalists know that growth ends. Financial people think it shouldn't. That's a real problem. Something very basic about the system by which we live has to change. And to get out of our trouble, we have all kinds of technical solutions. You may be involved with any number of them. If we just do this or this or this, the world can go on much as it is, and we do not have to change us, which is by far the hardest thing to change. Most of us know what we need to do. You're working toward it. Local circular economies that are more self-sufficient. But down at the bottom of all of this is how we think. What do we need to do? Well, this is just me, but having thought through a bunch of this, what do we need to do? Continue human life, which means continuing all life. That's a new guiding principle, not economic growth. It is continued existence. I may not continue. In fact, I'm sure I won't. But will the race of humanity continue? To do that, we need a huge reduction in human consumption of natural resources. I don't know whether there are too many people, but certainly there are too many people in the world that use way too much stuff. So what are we after? For success, we want local near self-sufficiency. A criterion of success in a village is that nobody needs to leave to send money back, or the United States, nobody has to drive an hour and a half to work someplace to get enough money to be able to live in some small community. Local biomass increases. We're still decreasing biomass. We think it's, in the US, we think it's a big victory when we've torn up something and we develop. Learning to live in a steady state with nature is a different mindset. And then here, I know of farm communities where the majority of people have even forgotten how to raise a garden. And so this is do it yourself. Well, when you have to do it yourself, you have less specialization. And it may not be quite as well done, but you do it yourself. Now, figuring out how to do that's a big learning experience. And this is a model that's based on, I don't know, there must be several hundred models of learning. But, and this is a little much to absorb quickly too, but most of our thinking stays up in this part of the pyramid. We say we're learning. And so we see, we react, we respond to immediate problems, go a little deeper and we interpret them. We don't have time for an elaborate experiment or doing any learning very formally. So this is first impulse causality. That has a lot of problems in it, because for a lot of us, our first impulse is what? Blame somebody else. And you can see that going on in a good part of the world right now. If it wasn't for so-and-so, why everything would be okay. Go a little deeper and you begin to get to more scientific explanations, more systemic research. Why do we have this problem? And the world is a tangle of interrelated problems. And so finding the right places to intervene is the mission. And then you note all the way down at the bottom is our core belief. Core beliefs determine what we think a problem is. Change the core belief and you see a problem differently. For example, here, long history of this, but people living in town are supposed to have a presentable yard if they have a house. Why? Well, that's a hand-me-down from in the West, old royalty, which 200 years ago or 300 years ago, somebody that was very high status with a lot of servants could afford to have a lawn. Didn't have lawnmowers. I mean, this was a lot of work. This was a symbol that you could boss a lot of people. So what happened? Well, it became possible for the average person to cut grass. Now what's happening? We cut way too much grass. In the United States, the total amount of grass from in all sources that's grown is about equal to the land area of the state of Oklahoma. It's big. Worse, when you grow the grass and you cut a lot of weeds, you are removing a lot of native growth, and most of the grass is an invasive species as nature sees it. And so you're telling the world, oh, I can make this happen. Most people don't realize that's what they're doing with a lawn. And that's just one belief handed down from how we've always thought. And how do you influence that? Well, from experience with the lean, you don't philosophize very much with people. Can't talk like I'm talking now. Get down to what some deep background may be for doing what you do. But if you change what they do every day, they begin to re-examine their beliefs. They don't know they're doing it necessarily. I don't, most people don't. But you change core beliefs generally by changing what people do. You can't mandate them to do something that they don't understand. Finish this out. What must we do? Well, foster a better vision of life. And at the village level, learn how to live so people don't want to leave. And then there's no way to know what the problems are locally, not unless you're there. And so bottom-up revitalization is engagement of people at a local level that have a vision of how things can be, and they figure out what the problems are and they resolve them. And then what's the role of the technology? Well, I doubt if all the technology we have today is going to be lost. We will not go back to how things were 400 years ago. But let people learn what they can do, what can be done. And some of you I know are into open system, do-it-yourself technology. And you get into, this is a lesson from old lean days in manufacturing. Improvement of a process is not done unless the improvement can be sustained. And sustaining the improvement is frequently more difficult than demonstrating here's a better way to do whatever it is. But if it can't be sustained, there is something about the thinking or the organization that prevents it from being sustained. Unless you have pursued an improvement to a point where people figure that out, make the changes, you're not sustaining. And so I think the same general idea can apply at the village level. If you have something that on the surface visibly is an improvement, but it doesn't, people don't like it or they can't continue doing it, question why, and that begins to get to their deep beliefs. And so with that, back to the STARS Forum, I'm really impressed. you're doing great work. And given the little spiel that I just went through, I would like to hear you have a conversation on what we're doing, what could we do better or do more, or how do we prompt really good living on the part of people, mostly in rural India, that enables them to have not the greatest life, not living like royalty, but they can somewhat enjoy living and they don't have to leave. And so with that, I'll shut up and take questions or wherever Chai wants to go with this.
Thank you, Doc. It was definitely good to see that your vision or your suggestion of how we should be living is shared by a lot of the people in this group. And in that sense, I think it's good to see that this is coming from a different context and coming from the United States from a different context. But I think we are all seeing the problems in a similar way. And we are seeing that similar solutions are also emerging, at least in the essence. And I think that's something that we've been also talking about is what is it that we should do differently so that forced migration does not happen. If people migrate on their own, that's a different thing. But what is happening definitely in India and definitely in many other parts of the world too, is that because rural economies are not able to give them the opportunities and nor are they able to offer them the kind of livelihoods and lifestyles, there's a forced migration that is taking place and it's tearing families and tearing communities as it happens. And we've seen that plenty of times in India. Let me open the floor for questions. We don't have questions in the chat yet, but if you want to have a dialogue with Doc Hall, please unmute yourself and you can even switch on your camera and share your thoughts or your questions. Please, I welcome any comments and questions from you.
Nobody knows what question to ask. I'm not surprised.
No, I'm sure these are fairly deep topics, as they say. They're not superficial. So obviously, it's going to touch somewhere deep inside.
Yeah, you got to think about it a little bit, which is okay.
Yeah.
Chaitanya?
Hi, Owen.
Hi, Chai. May I just lubricate the questions or help people ask and just give a little bit of background? As I've told you, and I had Doc's book, and Doc, I apologize again. I bought it at a lean conference 11 years ago, left it to gather dust, read it during the pandemic, contacted Doc, and we had a dialogue in which I introduced him to the informal sector, to the deprivation and stuff in India, and also the wonderful stuff that was going on there through STARS Forum, through IIT's Tata Center, through other people that I've met, wonderful people like yourself, Chai, and others, Vigyan Ashram, Rangde, and so on and so forth. And he said to me, and this struck me, is that, and we talked about Jugaad. I know some people fetishize Jugaad and want to dismiss it as frugal engineering. My concern is not concern. My opportunity is that the people who practice Jugaad, the good sort, not the bad sort, how do they learn if their education has been so poor or almost non-existent? That's something that the formal sector may want to study. And Doc said to me that perhaps, just maybe, that the informal sector in India and other developing countries may teach the West and the richer parts of India as well how to save the planet in the future. By there, if you read Compression, Doc has this structure of reuse things. If you can't reuse things, repurpose them, If you can't repurpose them, recycle them. So recycling comes third, and only then go for more material. But again, he says, don't, getting ore out of the ground is becoming more and more energy wasteful. And so just to this background, and as you know, Chai, you're part of the people in India who talk to Doc. I'd like that to be more a better, stronger relationship with the people in America, that and join that if you must. People trying to solve what Doc calls wicked problems. Doc, have I still misinterpreted you? I hope this is something that gets the questions going. I'll shut up now.
Oh, yes. By way of illustration, I came from a little town, a farm town in the Midwest of the United States that in the 1950s was sort of an ideal. Over time, it became crime-ridden. They have about the same problems with people committing suicide and everything else as inner cities. And so that too caused me to reflect. We think we're improving. What are we improving?
Good question, Doc. Anybody else in the audience who would like to engage? If not, we will definitely come back to this. Doc, you're going to be around, so we'll come back to to talk about some of the concepts a little bit more. If there are no immediate questions, then maybe we'll go to the second speaker and then open the floor for a discussion after Roberto is also done with his talk, because I think there are going to be some common threads between what we've heard from you and what Roberto is going to talk about. So let me then invite Roberto to share his perspectives, his stories about what he has seen happen, especially in the last 1.5 years. May I introduce Roberto in brief? He is currently teaching at the Sophia University, which is near Florence in Italy. Roberto has spent many years in India, working in different parts of India also, and he's quite familiar with the Indian context, the Indian culture, and so on. But a lot of his work has been around bringing intercultural and interreligious dialogues, and he's part of this movement known as the Focolare movement, which is everywhere, but we also have some of their chapters and centers in India as well, where the focus is on saying that what is common, how can we bring good things of different cultures and different religions together, and so on. So there are some very interesting things that we had learned about what had been going on in Italy during the COVID periods, before and during and after COVID. And we thought it would be very interesting for us to hear a different a story from a different nation, a different context. So thank you so much, Roberto, for taking the time to speak with us. May I request you to share your screen and share your thoughts with us too. And we'll get back to a Q&A at the end of your talk too. But in the meantime, if anybody would like to ask questions, feel free to use the chat. Bhakti and myself will be collating any questions, and we will route them to the speakers during or after the talks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well.
We can.
And it's a great pleasure to be with you all this evening, for you in India this afternoon, for me here in Florence. It's a great pleasure because as it was said, I lived for many years in India. So in a way, I consider India my second country. And so far, Mumbai is still the city or the metropolis where I lived the longest in my life. I stayed in Mumbai 28 years. And I had the chance in those 3 decades to visit many parts of India, both the rural areas as well as the cities. So I had a great experience, very enriching with the Indian people, with Indian culture. And I can say that I'm a different person thanks to this experience I lived with all of you in the subcontinent. Now, my presentation will be rather different from the one of Doc. And I'll try to do it through a PowerPoint presentation. And I must say that the whole stuff here in the PowerPoint, especially because I'm afraid my accent may not be clear to many of you, being a bit of a mixture of Italian, Indian, English, and so on and so forth. So in order to help each other, I thought of putting the whole stuff here for all of you and follow it step by step. So the title I gave to my presentation is a Fraternity, a roadmap for a positive emerging out of pandemic. And let's try to see how to proceed. The only thing is that doesn't move. Sorry, now started moving. So I would like to start with a quotation from the holy books of India, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is a reference point for what I'm going to share. In fact, I would like to expose some considerations and practice in the spirit of fraternity. Fraternity, which is a paradigm for us in the West, which emerged as a part of the trilogy coined by the French Revolution. We all remember freedom, equality, fraternity. But for the last 2 centuries, while equality and freedom received great attention, fraternity has been almost forgotten. And in recent times, this principle seems to re-emerge in an unexpected new way and also a new understanding. And it appears today to meet the great challenges posed by the pandemic. Now, my presentation would like to stress on perspectives which find their foundation on this category of fraternity. And the outbreak of COVID-19 has put the whole of humanity to the test. We know it very well in different way, but in a very common situation. It is a situation which no one could have imagined. It presented itself with a global dimension that no pandemics ever had before. Of course, a similar phenomena did affect humanity at regular intervals in time. Still, with a far more limited mobility, the spreading of the diseases was limited at the time to a much smaller part of the world, a portion of a continent, 1 or 2 countries, a portion of a certain country. Nevertheless, even then, casualties were high in number, and often humanity had to struggle very hard in order to start all over again his slow process on the path of progress. COVID-19 struck humanity in a different context. The last decades of the second millennium and the first of the present one carried unique characteristics previously unknown: technological growth and economic and financial progress, which never happened before. New technologies and fast means of transportation had transformed our planet into a global village. The same process of globalization contributed to widen the social and financial divide within the human race. On one side, a fast-growing economy allowed certain countries, especially in the West, to progress at a never-imagined pace. On the other side, larger portion of the world, often stricken by wars and famines, experienced a dramatically growing dimension of poverty. Impressive phenomena of masses moving away from their own land and country have affected not only Europe, but also many parts of Asia, Africa, South and Mesoamerica. Coming in contact with different cultures and religions in a way which most probably never happened earlier in human history was something which added to all we said so far. In fact, political manipulation of religious feelings and beliefs resulting in a worrisome growth of religious fundamentalism, a phenomenon which has marked all religions and created a wave of terrorist attacks in the name of God. Today, we can say that the whole world can be defined as some social and political analysts define it as a chaos land. The whole world is full of wars, tensions of any kind. And here we see in the map, let's say, overall vision of this. The appearance of the virus in this context came as an absolute surprise, and its potential consequences were initially dramatically downplayed. Notwithstanding several warnings launched by experts, no one ever expected that this kind of contagious disease could strike all over the world, and pandemic waves could follow one after the other, causing lakhs of victims. Suddenly, the whole of humanity experienced the spread of a contagion which they were unprepared to face, accompanied by devastating social, economic, human consequences. Every human being on the earth and every community felt vulnerable from physical, cultural, political viewpoints. All this happened, and it is still unfolding against another dramatic background, the climatic emergency, which has reached almost a point of no return. Now, all this is giving us a great lesson. We are all truly interconnected. It's not enough that only a rich country, for instance, ensure vaccines for their citizens, as it is happening. As long as the virus also circulates on the other side of the world, we will always be in danger, all of us, no exception. Pope Francis stated that no one can be saved all alone. And so we have to engage in a patient, committed, often even painful recognition of the fact that the other is my brother and my sister, and that his pain or pain, joys, sufferings are also mine. From a crisis like this, like the one of pandemic, we will not come out the same. Either we will come out better or we will come out worse. And above all, we'll never come out alone. This is why today is an imperative to commit to face problems together. This means we must also learn to collaborate where we are, showing that we are truly brothers and sisters before being different from the ethnic, cultural, religious, social point of view. My country is in danger as much as your country, my family as much as your family, and my community as much as yours is. There are countries faced with more severe challenges than others do due to the endemic poverty. Even inside the same country, there are areas, especially in rural contexts, which suffer far more than others, where infrastructures and medical health and schemes are more easily available. Confucius spoke this sentence: there is one word which may serve as a rule of practice for all one's life, reciprocity. Realizing that every life is a life in common, together we make up life, and life comes from the other. So fraternity and reciprocity are two terms which go very much together, one with the other. We are entrusted to each other. Never before in history has the caring relationship presented itself as a fundamental paradigm for human coexistence. Today, it's a matter of survival. We are called to a paradigmatic change, passing from interdependence to a new choice, the one of solidarity based on fraternity. By the way, interdependence was already something very positive. The golden rule inspires and stimulates us to do to the others what we would like the others to do to us. Pope Francis says that each one of us is called to think or rethink his or her mental or moral priorities to bring them into great conformity with the golden rule, ethical spirit. The challenge: rediscovering the real dignity of every single human being, beyond his, her gender, ethnicity, culture, social community, religious beliefs, economic status. Each man and woman carries a unique value in himself or herself, which we cannot ignore. And the root is exactly this, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, something that the sages of India understood millennia ago, and which in a way preceded for a long time, long millennia, the idea of fraternity. Now, in practical terms, we are called to a new type of economy, if we want to speak of economy, one that brings life and not death, one that is inclusive and not exclusive, humane and not dehumanizing, one that cares for the environment and does not spoil it. From a culture of having, we are called to change to a culture of giving. And where to find inspiration for this? This culture of giving is not, in fact, a form of philanthropy or welfare. It's something much deeper. And it is rooted in a spiritual dimension, which can find meaning in the Holy Scriptures of the different religions. For instance, for me as a Christian, the Spirit can draw inspiration from the words written in the Gospel. Give, and it will be given to you. But these words are not only sacred or spiritual, but they can be of inspiration even for managers, business. It is in a true spirit of this giving, the giver opens up to the other person and remains respectful of his, of her dignity. These words from our scriptures might manifest themselves to the business person in the form of an unexpected discovery of innovative technical solution or as an idea for a new winning product. We are called to go to the roots of our spirituality and discover that our sacred texts can suggest implement as a social and economic life which takes fraternity as a paradigm. All the sacred texts of all religions speak of this in one way or the other. It was mentioned before about the Focolare movement. Chiara Lubich, the founder, Italian Roman Catholic, launched a new economy model which had been defined as an economy of communion. In 1991, while visiting Brazil, Lubich drew entrepreneurs, workers, directors, consumers, savers, citizens, scholars, economists at various levels in promoting a practice and an economy culture imprinted on communion, gratuity, and reciprocity. Through their own example, they propose an alternative lifestyle to the dominant one within our capitalistic system. The economy of communion is a worldwide enterprise. Producers, entrepreneurs, workers, and their business associates are inspired by principles rooted in a culture of giving, an anthropological view that is neither individualistic nor collective, but rather fraternal and open to sharing and communion. When the Focolare began in 1943 in a small town in northern Italy, Trent, the rediscovery of the gospel, they were Christians, the gospel new commandment, love one another as I've loved you, inspired a communion of spiritual and material goods. This led a group of people, in majority young people at the time, to become convinced that putting the words of scriptures into practice holds the answer to every problem for individuals and society. Now, even before the outbreak of the pandemic, there was the awareness that globalization process could offer many people new opportunities for well-being or transform the world into a giant supermarket where the only type of human relationship is business-based and where everything becomes an economic good. The economy of communion is one of the answers in order to overcome these challenges. This new form of economy puts the experience and life experience and not ideology in the first place, and is in dialogue with all that is good in today's world. Again, I would like to quote Pope Francis who devoted one of his documents to fraternity and to economy, Fratelli Tutti, all brothers and sisters. And he says, we can share more profits in order to combat idolatry, change the structures in order to prevent the creation of victims and discarded people, give more of your leaven, so as to leaven the bread of many. May the no to an economy that kills becomes a yes to an economy that lets live, because its shares, includes the poor, uses profits to create communion. Now, what are the concrete commitments of people who live in the spirit of the economy of communion? To live and spread a new civil and economic culture, the one of giving. To form new entrepreneurs and renew present ones who willingly share their profit to sustain the goals of the economy of communion. To fight various forms of exclusion and poverty. To work on education and formation to the culture of giving. And what are the achievements? Involvement or around 600 enterprises in the world, with a progressive networking with the entrepreneurs among themselves, projects for social uplifted, carried out in several parts of the globe, networking of entrepreneurs, conferences on this approach to economy and finance, but also dissertation by university students, publication of books, teaching of economy of communion as a subject at a university in Sophia, close to Florence, summer and winter school for young students. The youth are in fact a target of the economy of communion. They've been addressed in a very special way. And I would like to conclude with another project, which is with two projects which are very important. One is a so-called prophetic economy, an international conference organized in Rome in 2017. And its goal was to start a common journey along with groups, communities, associations, movements that intended to give answers to the cry of the earth and the poor together, specifically for youth, but not only. Awareness that our world is facing an ecological and social crisis, and that climate change and increasing inequality are fueled by unjust economic structures, short-term policies, and outdated aid practices, aiming at young people who believe passionately in human development and sustainability. Like many of the activities of economy of communion, also prophetic economy represented just an experience in the beginning of a process. And the main target is the search for sustainable collective solution to the social and environmental problems, with particular attention to the poorest. 600 teenagers and young university students, entrepreneurs, listened and interacted with top personalities in these fields, like Jonathan Sachs and Vandana Shiva, whom you all know very well. This initiative clearly showed the commitment of young generations to issues related to economy, environment, and sustainability, offered an ideal platform for sharing good practices, success stories, which took place in most different corners of the world, and unleashed an amazing charge of creativity. The second experience is the so-called economy of Francesco, Francis economy, which was launched 2 years ago, was supposed to gather in Assisi, a small town in Italy, which was the birthplace of Francis of Assisi, some 2,000 economists, entrepreneurs under 35 years of age from all over the world. Because of the pandemic, this was just held online, but it's still going on. The program revolved around 12 villages, hosting participants' work on the big issues of the economy today and tomorrow. Work in care, management and grant, finance and humanity, agriculture and justice, energy and poverty, and so on and so forth. Economy is a woman, life and lifestyles. Why it was chosen Assisi and Francis? Because Francis was coming from one of the most affluent families of his village. And suddenly he decided to strip himself of all his goods and practically with nothing started helping the poor. So going against an economy of egoism. Participants of this economy of Francesco were young researchers and students, business persons, managers, social innovators, promoters of international organizations. They dealt with the environment, poverty, inequalities, new technologies, inclusive finance, sustainable development. The target of the event was to form a container of ideas and practice where young people could meet at a slow pace, having time to listen, to think, to ask what it means to build a new economy on human scale. Few figures: 3,400 participation requests, 2,000 young people selected to participate, 115 countries. The youngest participants were 12 years old, one from Slovakia and the other one from Thailand, and more than 80 preparatory events all over the world. Intergenerational dimension, Nobel laureates like Amartya Sen and Mohammed Yunus officially opened the 3 days in Assisi with young economists and entrepreneurs. And people like Vandana Shiva also could speak to the participants. All the speakers interacted with the young people and form a sort of a permanent incubator of idea projects, networking that is available to everyone. I just read 2 impressions of these young people. This is a lady from Oxford in England. I felt Francesco's invitation as a call. My vocation is this, studying and thinking. I have the privilege of being able to do it. I had to be present in this historical moment. Francesco, Francis, calls the young people, looks for their enthusiasm, passion, thought. I wanted to listen to the experience of others, learn from them, have time to stop and reflect on the future of our common home by putting my skills as an economist at the service of the community. I would like to participate in an event where questions rather than answers are the key. And a young African said participating in the economy of Francesco means taking on the commitment to build another economy. I will be in Assisi to live an experience and then be able to share it with the other young people in my own country, Cameroon, and all Africa. Coming to the conclusion, I try to focus on the paradigm of fraternity, inspiring principle for today's world to look forward towards the future. It's based on the golden rule, the golden rule, which is present in all cultures, all of our scriptures and religions, which is a source of inspiration in order to make sure that in our societies, common good may effectively prevail over private and selfish interests. And this tend to exclude many people from the mainstream circle of priorities. As a result, they justify profit as the real and only goal in economy and in production. In this perspective, environment, human beings can be exploited in order to maximize profit and capital. Fraternity helps to rectify this conceptual distortion of an economy which keeps into account the interest only of some of those involved in productive and economic processes. No one of us as a single persons, communities, and even as enterprises can ignore that. We have a social responsibility towards every human being and every community. So we have to help us to come out from the vicious circle where profit and interest represent the damage. And fraternity and solidarity help us to develop an attitude of care towards the environment. Poor segments of population and ecosystem are deeply interconnected and both victims of an economy which is exclusivist. What this project suggests to each of us and to our communities, what strategy does fraternity inspire us to undertake? there is no fixed methodology. The paradigm of fraternity inspires a roadmap, which we are called to creatively follow in each of our contexts, always keeping in mind that the world is one family, and that in the immensely rich wisdom of every culture, there is a constant, the idea of doing to others what we would like them to do on us. All of us, at the personal and community level, can start from below and case by case act at the most concrete and local levels, and then expand to the farthest reaches of our countries and our world. And these are the contexts, if you wish, for these two projects. Thank you for the patience, and I hope you could follow well enough the presentation.
Thank you so much, Roberto, for your talk. Obviously, the context of today's sessions, as well as the thoughts that you and Doc have shared today, are a little different than what we have heard so far in the first 4 days of the conference. And it reminds me of an interesting question, saying, I'm not sure if I've got it right, but the memory was like this, that wisdom is a love affair with questions. And I think today we've had we didn't have too many questions in the chat, but I'm sure there are a lot of questions in people's minds. And I think there are a couple of questions that that were asked, and maybe I will ask Narendra to talk it out, so that I think what you're asking is a fairly interesting question. Narendra, if you can unmute and ask that question, I think it'll be nice that way.
I think, thank you, both, Roberto. I mean, it's great. And Dr. Hall, I had the opportunity to visit Kelly School of Business 3 times, Indiana University. So when I noticed that, so I mean, it was very insightful. I mean, I really, because I'm a student of sustainability sciences as well, or so-called whether sustainable development we should say, or sustainability and development are 2 different things which we need to helping kind of understanding in entirety both. So after looking into the economic model, or what you shared as a Vasudev Kutumbakam, the Earth as a family, as for my understanding on this is, it's not only just, I think we need to think the whole cosmic kind of, not just limiting to the Earth or to that kind of principle. So I really wonder, I mean, whether my question, I just say that what is the purpose of human existence? That's a one question which I think the whole humanity also keep on struggling with ourselves. And once we get clarity on that, so then what goals we should take up? So these are the questions, like what goals, whether it should be a long-term kind of approach or a short-term. There are many things which I'm still trying to digest, which you said, and it may be climate change, the things from coming from the both, and now I'm just trying to kind of bringing both together. So this question is like, what should be the purpose of human existence? As I would love to listen your insight on that from both the speakers. Thank you.
Want me to start?
Yes.
My proposal is that the objective is continued life. It isn't just continued life of humans, because we're not only connected to each other, we're connected to all other life. And the last couple of decades research on microbiomes is a pretty good evidence of it. Can't live without your microbiome. Kill your microbiome and you are dead. And so the more research that is done, the more you see this. What's the purpose? Well, it's not for me to continue existence personally. It's for all life to continue, and humanity is part of it. And recognizing that we are part of it is a really difficult transition, because the economics that you heard at the School of Business, the economics that I grew up with and always thought it was, a lot of it was baloney, is the opposite of that. It's to win. The more you win, well, the greater you are. Baloney, the more you win, for many of us, the more you lose. And that is so fundamentally different that I cannot see it occurring throughout the world quickly or easily. I really like Roberto's presentation, very similar message, derived from coming at it a different way, but it's the same message. And the fundamentals of what we do have to change. And you can't change the fundamentals without doing something very different at detail level, company by company, village by village. And I ask myself, what is a company in this future world? Is it a big thing like a Apple? Or is it something very, very different? And many local businesses do not try to grow. What's their objective? To do a great job for their community. It's not to make the most money. It's not a Wall Street objective. This is very, very different, and people will not come to it easily. Roberto?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Looking Narendra, my answer may be a bit, how can I say, surprising to you probably. According to me, the purpose of life, the goal of life remains a mystery. In the sense, I think to the best of my knowledge, any one of us, any man, any woman in the planet may find difficult, really difficult to pinpoint what is the purpose in life. I think it's a mystery, and rightly so. It's a mystery that men and women, the human being is called to discover day by day. And I think this is the experience of all of us. The point is this, that the answer may come unfolding little by little, but may come only in a community as human beings, not as a human being. That's why the dimension of reciprocity, of fraternity, of solidarity, of this idea del Vasudeva Kutumbakam, that we are a family, may be extremely helpful. Definitely, I will never find an answer to that mystery alone. I need the others, I need my community, I need the world in order to find the answer. So that's why I feel that your question is very, how can I say it, very apt, very, very right. But I feel that it's a mystery, and each one of us is called to discover it along with all the others next to us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yogesh, you also had a few questions. Would you like to speak about them?
My question, I have a practical questions to Roberto about the economy of communion. Like the 600 entrepreneurs you talked about, those who are practicing these principles, how they are actually doing it, because how they are giving their profit or whatever they are making, how they are giving it actually, and is there is any kind of formula or model or guidelines So I just want to know about it.
Look, there are guidelines, but then it's up to each entrepreneur to see how, if, how, and when to implement it. Usually, the profit for those who adhere to this project, the profit is divided in three parts. One part is kept for the entrepreneurs to keep the business going. Obviously, one part to pay the salaries to the people working for him or for her. And the third part is the one which is put aside for a common fund which promotes formation to the mentality of the economy of giving rather than the economy of keeping, of holding. And when I speak of formation, means summer schools, camps, courses, conferences, whatever may form, especially young generation. A lot of investments of this third part of the fund is given for this, and the target are the youth. Now, the three portions, the three segments are not equally divided, obviously. The third part at times is much smaller than the previous two, because you have to pay the people working for you and you have to reinvest in order to keep the business going. But definitely it's an important part because many, let's say, many formation programs to this idea were possible precisely because of this fund which was created. So in this favors also the networking among the entrepreneurs who are in the project, because often they themselves are the ones to conduct or to participate in these programs. Usually it's informal education, but there are also formal teachings. For instance, at our university, we teach several subjects on this.
How would it work if there wasn't any money? And so if you go to, say, an indigenous tribe living as they once lived, no money. They might use a little money to trade among the tribes, but everything is truly communal. No money. And in a business, the most important part of the business probably cannot be measured in money. What is it that happens that is between people, that is not a transaction? And so when I think about business today, how do you get away from being so transactionally oriented? We have great trouble because of this. We even want to calculate the total value of the entire global environment. That's ridiculous. And so how do we reveal to ourselves how we have pushed our concept of transactional values to a point where they are no longer useful? Can that be done at the village level? Yes, I think so. Experiment with it. How do you make things work very differently?
I just wanted to compliment what Doc just said, because I was very technical in your in answering your question, but I would say that the best, how can I say, richness or the best asset people involved in this project gain is the richness in human relationships, because this kind of economy creates a relationship within the business, but also with other people involved in business, somehow connected with the business, living in this spirit, and a relationship which is really human, really, let's say, interconnected, really inspired by solidarity. So this probably is the biggest asset. As Doc rightly said, you cannot quantify this in money, but it's probably the biggest and the richest patrimony that these small enterprises have.
Thank you so much, Doc and Roberto, for your talks. One very different sort of flavor, I think, of today's conversations compared to what was earlier is there was a lot of deep thought, deep thinking, very important questions, not just at an individual level, but at the community, society level and national levels and so on. So I think in that sense, the tone of the discussion today was a little bit different. And naturally, as a result of that, we don't have the kind of questions that normally happens in a conference. But I think you have both left us with a lot to think about, a lot to think in terms of how we lead our own lives, how we work with others to lead our lives, and so on and so forth. And I thank you both on behalf of STARS for taking your time today to share these thoughts. And I'm sure this conversation will continue forward too. But in interest of time, what I would now do is uh, request Dr. Yogesh Kulkarni, the chairperson of STARS, to give his closing remarks, to talk a little bit about what STARS has been doing and share with us what has been happening in the last few months and so on. So, Dr. Kulkarni, over to you.
Is my screen visible now?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Chaitanya, and all the participants of the conference. It was wonderful 5 days. We are at the closing session of this 12th annual conference of skill training for advancement of rural society, STARS Forum. The day one was started when we talked about migrant labor and how it affected the because of the COVID. And we had Paramjit Singh and Aliva Das sharing about their work during the pandemic. And Narendra ji was moderated all the discussion during the first day. The second day was deep focused on the COVID and the differently able and physically challenged people. It was also a sharing of the practitioners from the Radhakrishnan and from Tommaso from Italy. And they spoke about the work they are doing, especially for the disabled people, of course, during the pandemic time. So that was the second day. Third day was very interesting when we had the community response to COVID. And we heard from Shiriji Patwardhan of Swarup Vardhini and social activist Medha Patkar. She talked about about the COVID the response, but of course she threw open the pictures and advocacy issues. Then on the fourth day yesterday, we talked about self-employability of rural youth. In this session, we had Pragati Gokhale. She talked about how the mobile phone can be used, and she leveraged it for the marketing of rural products. Her website marketmirchi.com. And OP Goel of Bosch India Foundation, he talked about their work of Bosch Foundation and the opportunities we had. And of course, yes, today we had the peak of this thing. The 4 days were from the practitioners, and today we got bigger the picture. And as Chaitanya was talking about deep philosophical and basically thoughts which we can take it forward. We had about more than 350 registrations in the conference throughout the days. And so I say it was a very wonderful conference and many thoughts. Unfortunately, it was in virtual mode. Hopefully next year we will be able to meet in person and have this conference face to face. Just to give you a idea of what Star Forum has done during the last year, throughout the year we were active and conducted various programs. Of course, because it was pandemic time, most of our activities were online. We had conducted kitchen garden courses online, especially for the nutrition security. We had conducted in Hindi and Marathi, both the languages. We collaborated with the MAVIM, that is Maharashtra Mahila Vikas Mahamandal, Arthik Mahila Vikas Mahamandal, that is for the women empowerment. It's a organization set up by government of Maharashtra, and we conducted the kitchen garden course for them. We also did the impact measurement of whatever work we did. Under the guidance of Dr. Sudhir Prabhu, we had conducted a systematic impact measurement analysis of the work we had done. And for the 150 participants, we collected the data for more than 6 months. And we found, after doing this course, we found there is an increase in hemoglobin level of the participant, then increasing the eating, their habits of eating the healthy foods, also increasing in their weekly expenditure. So I'm not going into the numbers, but these are some of the indicators the impact measurement came out after the impact measurement analysis. We took out the 3 newsletters, and the 4th one of this conference will come out soon, from the Growth Trust, Ajivika Bureau, from the BIF, and we shared their success stories and their model of skill training with all the members of STARS Forum. We also conducted several webinars to inform the members about successful business models and the skill training initiatives by its member organizations. So that was the activities which we, the Star Forum, had undertaken in the last year. We are able to do this under the guidance of this the executive committee. The executive committee, the Dr. Sudhir Prabhu, who is always supporting us, Dr. Shama Maitre, then Ashish Chavan, Rita Sengupta, then we got Raghu from Mitraniketan. Bhakti, she is like in touch with many of you, and she is behind the whole, she's the anchor of this program. So all credit goes to her for running this program, in fact, organizing this the conference so well. Chaitanya is always there for putting the, I will say, the conceptual framework for the Star Forum activity. So he's our treasurer. Mr. Ashok Kalbag is a vice chairman. Venkatesh and Narendra Paulji is our the trustees of the Stars Forum. And just to give you the idea of what the work we had done, so we are meeting every quarter to discuss the plan and programs of the Stars Forum, and these are the meeting of the executive committee which had conducted during the last year. So this is in brief what we are doing in the Stars Forum. I want to thank you all the participants and all the members of the Stars Forum, if the organizations, for their the support and participating into the Stars Forum activity. So these are our the contact detail. I request you to please get in touch with us, and so we can share our success stories, our learnings with each other, and we can help each other to grow this the sector. And of course, that is what the mission of the Star Forum is. With this, I want to once again thank you all the participants, and of course the board of trustees and the executive committee of the Stars Forum. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chaitanya.
Thank you, Dr. Yogesh Kulkarni, for your concluding remarks. On behalf of all of us here, thanks to all the speakers who came and shared their views, their experiences, their learnings, with all of us. And we're very grateful to every single speaker who has come here today, until today, for the first 5 days. And with that, I think it is time to wind up this 12th annual conference. We always hope at the end of the conference that next year we should hopefully meet in person. We said the same thing 2020. We are having to say the same thing 2021. But I'm sure that this forum, this mechanism of meeting people virtually is also fruitful, because it allows us to engage with so many more people from across the country and across the world. And so hopefully it is going to be in hybrid mode in the next year onwards. That is, we will have some programs in public, in person, and some which is on this kind of platform, allowing us to benefit from both the physical interactions as well as the opportunity to engage with a much wider audience as well. So thank you once again, and we wish you a good evening.